Picture this. You wake up on a Tuesday morning, make yourself a cup of coffee, and decide to check your bank balance, just like you do every week. And when you log in, the number you see stops you cold. It's not what it was yesterday. In fact, a significant chunk of your money is completely frozen. You can't touch it. You can't move it. You can't pay your bills with it. And the bank isn't going to explain it to you on the phone. Because what happened to your account has nothing to do with your bank. It has everything to do with the IRS. I know that sounds extreme, maybe even impossible, but what I'm about to share with you today is something tens of thousands of retired Americans discover every single year, often with absolutely no warning, and often at the worst possible time. The IRS has a legal authority that most people have never heard of, and it allows them to reach directly into your bank account and seize your money without ever taking you to court. No judge, no jury, no lawsuit. Just a notice, a deadline you may not have even known about, and then silence. My name is Whitfield, and this channel exists for one reason: to make sure that you, as a retiree, are never blindsided by the systems that are designed to work against you when you don't know the rules. So if this is your first time here, welcome, and I want to ask you to hit that subscribe button right now before we go any further, because the information on this channel is the kind of thing your bank won't tell you, your accountant might not mention, and the IRS certainly isn't going to put in a flyer. Every video we put out is built to protect your income, your savings, and your peace of mind in retirement. So subscribe, and let's get into it. Now, the legal tool the IRS uses to take money directly from your bank account is called a bank levy. And that word levy is important because it sounds bureaucratic and boring, which is exactly how something this serious gets overlooked. A levy is not a bill. It's not a warning letter. It's not a request. A levy is a legal seizure of your property to satisfy an unpaid tax debt. And the key thing that separates an IRS bank levy from almost every other type of debt collection in America is this: the IRS does not need a court order to do it. A credit card company has to sue you. A medical provider has to take you to court. But the IRS, they operate under a completely different set of rules. Once certain legal steps have been completed on their end, they can send a single document to your bank, and your account gets frozen the same day. Now, I want to be clear about something from the start. The IRS does not just randomly decide to freeze accounts. This is not a system that targets people who have never had a tax problem. The levy process has a very specific sequence, and it takes months, sometimes well over a year, to reach the point where your bank account is actually at risk. The problem is that most retirees either never receive the earlier notices, receive them and don't understand what they mean, or receive them and assume it will work itself out. And that last assumption is the one that costs people the most. Let me walk you through exactly how this process works, because understanding the sequence is what gives you the power to stop it. It usually starts quietly. Maybe you filed a return and owed a balance. Maybe you missed a required minimum distribution from your IRA one year and the IRS assessed a tax on it. Maybe your income changed and you weren't withholding enough from your pension or Social Security. Whatever the reason, a balance appears on your IRS account. The IRS sends you a notice called a CP14, which is simply a bill. It says you owe money and asks you to pay. If you don't respond, they follow up. They send a CP501. Then a CP503. These are all versions of the same message: pay this balance. Most people who end up with a frozen bank account ignored all of those earlier notices. Some never received them because they moved and didn't update their address with the IRS. Some read them and set them aside, thinking it wasn't urgent, and some truly had no idea what those letters meant. But here's where everything changes. The notice that you absolutely cannot afford to ignore is called the CP90. This is formally titled the Final Notice of Intent to Levy, and it is the most important piece of mail the IRS will ever send you. When this letter arrives, the clock starts. You have exactly 30 days from the date printed on that notice to take action before the IRS is legally allowed to start seizing your assets. The CP90 tells you specifically what they plan to do, and the list includes your bank accounts, your wages if you're still earning any, your pension income, your investment accounts, and critically, your Social Security benefits. That 30-day window is not a suggestion. It is a legal right that Congress built into the tax code specifically to protect you. During those 30 days, you have the right to request what's called a collection due process hearing, or a CDP hearing. You do this by filling out Form 12153 and submitting it to the address listed on your CP90 notice. When you request a CDP hearing, the IRS is legally required to stop any levy action while your case is being reviewed by their independent appeals office. This is one of the most powerful protections available to you, and according to tax professionals who handle these cases every day, a significant number of retirees never use it simply because they didn't know it existed. Now let's talk about what happens if that 30-day window passes and no action is taken. This is where the process accelerates dramatically. Once the IRS decides to proceed with the bank levy, they send a document, Form 668-A, directly to your bank. Your bank receives it and is legally required to comply. On the day that notice arrives at your bank, your funds are frozen as of that exact date and time. And I want you to understand what frozen means in this context. It does not mean the account is closed. It does not mean every dollar disappears overnight. What it means is that whatever balance was sitting in your account at the moment that notice arrived is put on hold. You cannot withdraw it, you cannot transfer it, you cannot use it to pay your mortgage, your prescriptions, or your electric bill. Here's where the one piece of good news comes in, and it's a small window, but it matters. Federal law gives you 21 days between the moment your account is frozen and the moment your bank must actually send that money to the IRS. Those 21 days exist specifically to give you a chance to contact the IRS, explain your situation, and potentially arrange a resolution before the funds are transferred out of your account permanently. If you find out your account has been levied, those 21 days are the most urgent and important days of your financial life in that moment. Do not waste them. Do not wait and see. Call the IRS immediately and consider getting a tax professional on the phone with you. I also want to make sure you understand something that surprises a lot of retirees. The bank levy does not affect deposits that come in after the freeze date. So if your Social Security payment comes in 3 days after the levy was placed, that specific deposit is generally not captured by the same levy. It arrives after the freeze date. However, and this is critical, the IRS can issue additional levies, and they have a separate ongoing mechanism for reaching your Social Security benefits that works very differently from a standard bank levy. Through a program called the Federal Payment Levy Program, the IRS works directly with the Social Security Administration to intercept your monthly benefit before it ever reaches your bank account. Under this automated program, the IRS can take up to 15% of your monthly Social Security retirement benefit. So if you're receiving $1,800 a month from Social Security, the IRS can withhold $270 every single month automatically, and that continues without any separate notice each month until the debt is fully resolved or a formal agreement is in place. The withholding happens at the source. The Social Security Administration reduces your payment before it's sent to you, and because it's automated, it doesn't stop just because a few months go by. It continues until you take action. Now, there is one important exception you should know about. Supplemental Security Income, known as SSI, cannot be levied by the IRS through this program. SSI is a needs-based benefit for people with very limited income and resources, and it is specifically protected. Regular Social Security retirement benefits, Social Security disability benefits paid to adults, and survivors' benefits paid to adults are all subject to this levy, but SSI is off limits. If you or a spouse receive SSI and you are concerned about a tax debt, that specific benefit stream is protected. For most retirees, though, Social Security is their primary income, and the idea that 15% of it could be quietly redirected to the IRS every month, month after month, without any additional court action, without any separate warning, can genuinely destabilize a retirement budget that was built on a specific number. This is exactly why understanding what to do before things reach this point is so important. So let's talk about your options. Because the message of this video is not to scare you. The message is to make sure you know that at almost every stage of this process, there are legal paths available to you. The IRS is not unreasonable when taxpayers engage with them. What they are is relentless when taxpayers disappear. The first and most common resolution is an installment agreement. This is simply a payment plan. You contact the IRS, you agree to pay a set amount every month toward your balance, and in exchange, the IRS stops levy action as long as you stay current on the plan. For many retirees with a manageable tax balance, this is the cleanest and fastest solution. You can set up an installment agreement online through the IRS website if you owe less than $50,000 in combined taxes, penalties, and interest. If you owe more than that, you'll need to submit a more detailed financial statement. But the key point is this: once an installment agreement is active and you're making payments, your bank account is no longer at risk of being seized. The second option is something called currently not collectible status, and this one is specifically worth knowing about if you're a retiree on a fixed income. If you can demonstrate to the IRS that your monthly income is fully consumed by your basic living expenses, housing, food, transportation, medical costs, and that you have no meaningful assets to liquidate, the IRS can classify your account as currently not collectible. This doesn't eliminate the debt. The balance still exists, and interest and penalties continue to accrue, but it does temporarily halt all collection activity, including levies. The IRS will periodically review your financial situation, and if things improve significantly, they can resume collection. But for retirees who are genuinely living on a tight fixed income with no savings cushion, this status can provide real breathing room. The third option is an offer in compromise. This is the one you've probably seen advertised on late-night television, the idea of settling your tax debt for less than you owe. And while those commercials make it sound almost too good to be true, the offer in compromise is a completely legitimate IRS program. The IRS will consider settling your debt for a reduced amount when they determine that collecting the full balance from you is not realistic given your financial circumstances. In 2024, the IRS received over 33,000 offer in compromise applications and accepted approximately 7,000 of them. That's a real program with real outcomes, though it's not guaranteed, and the acceptance rate was about 21% that year, which means the application needs to be strong, accurate, and well documented. For retirees with limited income, limited assets, and a tax balance they genuinely cannot pay in full, an offer in compromise is absolutely worth exploring, ideally with the help of a qualified tax professional. And the fourth option, which we touched on earlier, is requesting a collection due process hearing using Form 12153. This is your formal legal right to appeal the IRS's intent to levy before it happens. You can request this hearing within 30 days of your CP90 notice, and during that hearing, you can discuss any of the resolution options above, challenge the amount of the debt if you believe there's an error, and explore alternatives to seizure. Even if you missed that initial 30-day window, you may still be able to request what's called an equivalent hearing for up to 1 year after the notice date, though you lose some protections if you go that route. There's also one consequence of serious tax debt that most retirees never see coming, and I want to mention it here because it's increasingly relevant. If the IRS classifies your tax debt as seriously delinquent, which generally means you owe more than $59,000 in assessed taxes, penalties, and interest combined, and no installment agreement or payment plan is in place, they can notify the State Department, and your U.S. passport can be revoked or denied. For retirees who travel internationally, this is not a theoretical concern. It's something the IRS has been actively enforcing in recent years. Now let me bring this back to earth for a moment, because I want to address what I think is the most common emotional response when people first hear about all of this. And that response is avoidance. When a letter from the IRS shows up and it says something you don't want to deal with, the instinct is to set it aside, hope it's a mistake, or tell yourself you'll handle it later. I understand that feeling. But I want you to hear this clearly. Every day that passes without action when you have an IRS notice is a day that works against you. The interest accumulates, the penalties grow, the window to request a hearing gets smaller, the options narrow. Time is literally the IRS's greatest advantage over a taxpayer who does nothing. Think about someone like Walter, a retired teacher, 68 years old, living in Ohio on Social Security and a small pension. A few years back, Walter took a distribution from an old IRA to help his daughter with a down payment on a house. He didn't realize that distribution was going to trigger a significant tax bill, and he didn't have enough withheld to cover it. The IRS sent him a CP14, then a follow-up notice, and then eventually the CP90. Walter set all of those letters in a pile on his kitchen counter, assumed his accountant would tell him if it was serious, and never called anyone. By the time he discovered that his bank account had been frozen, the 21-day window had started without him knowing it. He had to scramble to get a tax professional involved, spend money on resolution fees he hadn't budgeted for, and endure weeks of stress that no one in retirement should have to go through. And Walter's situation is not unusual. It happens to people every single day. The thing that makes Walter's story particularly painful is that his underlying tax problem was genuinely fixable. Had he responded to the CP90 when it arrived, he likely could have set up an installment agreement within a week, avoided the bank freeze entirely, and paid off his balance over time without any of the chaos. The IRS is not looking to destroy anyone's retirement. They are an agency with a job to do, and when you engage with them, they engage back. When you disappear, they escalate. So here is what I want you to walk away with today. If you have any outstanding balance with the IRS, even a small one you've been putting off, take this video as your sign to deal with it now, before it compounds. Go to irs.gov and check your account balance. You can create an online account for free and see exactly what the IRS says you owe, which tax years are involved, and whether any notices or liens have been filed. That 5 minutes of checking could be the most valuable 5 minutes you spend this month. If you've already received a CP90 or any notice that mentions the words intent to levy, please do not set it aside. Count the days from the date on that notice. If you're still within 30 days, fill out Form 12153 and request your collection due process hearing. That single action puts your levy on hold and buys you time to explore every option available to you. If you're past 30 days, call the IRS directly at the number on your notice, or consider working with an enrolled agent or tax attorney who handles IRS collections regularly. And if you're someone who has no current IRS issue, but you want to make sure you never end up in this situation, the best thing you can do is make sure your withholding is accurate. If you receive Social Security, you can submit a voluntary withholding request, Form W-4V, to have federal taxes withheld from your monthly benefit. If you take IRA distributions or have pension income, work with a tax professional each year to make sure you're either withholding enough or making estimated quarterly payments. Preventing the debt in the first place is always the cheapest and least stressful option. There is one more thing I want to say before we wrap up, and it's something I genuinely believe. The retirees who get hurt by systems like this are almost never people who are being reckless with their taxes. They're people who missed something, who didn't understand how a distribution would be taxed, who went through a health crisis or a family situation and fell behind, and who then didn't know what to do when the IRS came looking. The system is designed in a way that punishes inaction above almost everything else. Knowing that is the first step to protecting yourself. If this video helped you understand something you didn't know before, I have one simple request. Share this with someone in your life. A parent, a sibling, a friend who's retired or getting close to retirement, who might need to hear it. You don't know whose account might be sitting one ignored letter away from being frozen, and that share could genuinely change someone's situation. I also want to hear from you in the comments. Have you or someone you know ever received an IRS levy notice? What did you do? How did it turn out? Your experience might be exactly what someone else scrolling through these comments needs to read right now. So drop it below. I read every single comment on this channel, and your story matters. We are going to keep going deeper into topics like this one. If you want to understand exactly which Social Security mistakes are quietly shrinking monthly checks for retirees right now, that video is coming up next on this channel. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it, because on Whitfield, the goal is always the same, to make sure you know what you need to know before you need to know it. Take care of yourself, protect your money, and I'll see you in the next one.